They built 35 luxury homes on my family's land while I was deployed in Afghanistan. So I walked up to the rusted gate valve my grandfather installed in 1978 and turned it. Within hours, their dream neighborhood became lakefront property, unplanned, unpaid, and underwater. Now let me tell you how the HOA learned the meaning of federal water rights and why there's still no king in the cul-de-sac. You ever come home expecting peace and instead find a war zone, not with bullets, with concrete trucks, zoning permits, and women in tennis skirts swinging legal threats like they're rackets? I'm Jake Morrison, 34, Army Corps engineer, born and raised in Travis County, Texas, and I didn't just inherit 47 acres of pasture, I inherited a battle. The Willowbrook Estates HOA had a vision. Tennis courts, McMansions, gated smiles, and HOA board members who treat property rights like suggestions. While I was overseas risking my life for freedom, they acquired the back 40 of my family's land through something called adverse possession. Legal theft. That's right. They built roads and laid foundations on property they didn't own because my sister Sarah, out in California, let a shady land company manage the trust. She meant well, but these people, they meant business. The first time I saw Maggie Thornwell, the HOA president, she was wearing pearls and polyester, stepping out of a golf cart like a dictator stepping off a throne. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You should have stayed gone, soldier. We made improvements. You left it to rot." She didn't know about the dam, about the 1978 Army Corps engineering permits, about the original 1923 water deed buried in county archives, or that Pops, my granddad, had engineered that entire watershed system for drought relief and livestock care, and that meant everything downstream, including their glittery coal. DSAC dreams depended on my goodwill and gravity. But she kept pushing. She called me unstable, harassed my guests, got her husband, a city councilman, to fast-track an emergency rezoning. They laughed at my warnings, mocked my uniform, and dismissed my paperwork. So I stopped talking, and I started documenting, plotting, engineering. Because you see, this wasn't just about land anymore. This was about legacy. This was about water, and it was time they got a taste of their own floodplain. They say all politics is local, but in Willowbrook Estates, it was personal. See, once Maggie and her HOA goons figured out I wasn't going to quietly roll over, they turned on the pressure. First came the letters. Oh, the letters. Notice of code violation, unsightly structure complaint, unauthorized agricultural equipment, whatever that means. My 1962 family farmhouse, according to their standards, was a health hazard, not the 35 half-built homes leaching into protected soil. No, my porch needed a rebuild, $8,000 worth, they said. Then came the safety patrol, 3 of them, khaki pants, HOA polos tucked in like they were going to war with a weed whacker. Every day they parked at the edge of my property, writing down license plates, taking pictures of anyone who stepped on my land. One guy actually flew a drone over my barn. I shot it down and mailed the wreckage back with a copy of the 4th Amendment. Didn't hear much from him after that. But the pièce de résistance, a coordinated wellness check, yep. Maggie called veteran services and claimed I might be a danger to myself and others. A social worker shows up on my porch, clipboard in hand, trying to mask her discomfort. Behind her, Maggie's watching from her golf cart like she's the queen of HOA England. When I asked her what made her think I was unwell, she smiled and said, It's been acting a little erratic. Lady, I'm not erratic, I'm calculating, and you can bet I was documenting everything. Timestamp trail cam footage, satellite images from my army buddies, water flow meters logging every gallon they diverted from Pop's dam. I had a binder thick enough to kill a possum with, ready for court, but court was never the plan. You see, they were building fast, too fast, pouring foundations before permits were final, skipping wetland assessments. I sent a tip to an old friend at the EPA. His response? Jake, this smells like jail time. Still, Maggie wasn't done. She called a press conference in front of my property, claimed the dam was a danger. She stood there, fake tears and all, surrounded by moms, holding toddlers like they were hostages. Our children are at risk, she cried. This dam could collapse at any moment. Collapse? Maggie, sweetie, I built dams in war zones. And when this one opens, it's not gonna collapse. It's gonna cleanse. I could hear the concrete trucks before I saw them. backing up with that high-pitched beep, beep, beep like a warning siren for stupidity. Every pour they made on my land, every steel beam they hammered into what used to be my grandfather's pasture, just stacked the case against them. And they didn't even know it. They were racing the clock. But what they didn't realize, I was the clock. You ever look at something and realize you're the only person who understands how dangerous it is? That was me, standing at the base of Pop's Dam, looking at what used to be a gentle retention structure for cattle, and now realizing I held the fate of 35 homes in my calloused, government-certified hands. The water levels were rising, my patience was dropping, the law was catching up, but the HOA, they were doubling down. That's when I got the letter. Certified mail, City of Austin, eminent domain hearing, 2 weeks out. Let that sink in. They were trying to seize my property, the same land they illegally built on, for public safety. The hearing was just a formality, they said. An HOAF ass-tracked it with Rick Thornwell, Maggie's husband and a city councilman, greasing the paperwork like it was his lawnmower engine. They offered me $180,000 for land assessed at $890,000. My reply? I slid a photocopy of the 1923 senior water rights deed across the table. Silence, then panic, because that little scrap of paper was more than a title. It was a time bomb. You see, in Texas, water rights don't follow the land. They follow the deed. And my great-grandfather's deed gave me legal dominion over every drop of Willow Creek's flow. You can't build luxury homes without access to water. And if I revoke those rights, those homes aren't homes. They're monuments to greed. Now here's where the magic happens. Want to help me fight HOAs like this? Then drop a comment below saying no king in the cul-de-sac. Twice. That's right, 2 times. It's how we let the algorithm and the HOA elite know we're not backing down. Because when they tried to label me unstable, I built a legal war machine. When they tried to drown me in bureaucracy, I wrote a floodplain blueprint in ink. And when they tried to steal my family's land, I reminded them of something they forgot. I don't need a lawyer. I have gravity. The day of the hearing, the courthouse smelled like mildew and power. City officials in polyester suits, developers whispering to lawyers with slicked-back hair, and Maggie Thornwell sitting smug in the front row wearing pearls like armor. You'd think she was there to receive an award, not steal a man's legacy. They called my name like I was some traffic ticket holdout. I walked to the mic, calm as a Sunday prayer, and placed 2 things on the podium. A laminated copy of the 1923 Senior Water Rights Deed, a USB stick loaded with footage of diverted creek water, EPA violations, and drone scans of homes built in a federal flood zone. I didn't say much, just 86 words. This is a federal water crime. The silence was biblical. The city council's lawyer stammered something about pending jurisdictional clarification. Maggie shifted in her chair. Rick actually stood up, red-faced, demanding a recess. But it was too late. The hearing had become a record, and records can't be buried. Not when the EPA is CC'd on every email. That afternoon, the HOA newsletter changed tone fast. No more veteran squatter talk. No more community beautification fluff. Just legalese. They were losing control of the narrative. And Maggie? She was unraveling. She posted on Nextdoor again, this time with full paranoia. Claimed I had military-grade surveillance systems on my property. She wasn't wrong, technically. One of my army buddies had loaned me a thermal drone, but what really sent her spiraling was when I started talking to her neighbors. Turns out, not everyone in Willowbrook Estates was thrilled with how fast their dream homes were turning into money pits. Foundation cracks, shifting soil, basement leaks. The HOA was scrambling to silence them, issuing fines for public disparagement if they complained on social media. So I held a town hall, right on my own land. Barbecue, folding chairs, iced tea, and people came, not just locals, farmers, veterans, environmentalists, even a few former HOA members who'd been run out by Maggie's regime. We shared stories, showed documents, and started building a coalition. For the first time, Maggie didn't look like a queen. She looked like what she really was, a petty suburban tyrant with a bad spray tan and a worse plan. And me? I wasn't just some angry landowner anymore. I was becoming something much harder to bulldoze, a symbol. That night, after the town hall, I sat on the hood of my truck overlooking the dam, sipping black coffee and watching the moonlight shimmer across the rising water. It was quiet, too quiet. In Texas, silence before a storm usually means one thing: something's coming, and this time it wasn't thunder. Around 2 a.m. I heard it, boots on gravel. Grabbed my flashlight and crept toward the gate valve structure, and there he was, hard hat, safety vest, bolt cutters in hand, some contractor, likely hired under the table, trying to tamper with the spillway controls. I didn't yell. I just flipped on the flashlight and let the metallic glint of my old service pistol do the talking. He dropped everything and ran. The message was clear. They knew the dam was real, and they were scared of what I could do with it. So scared, in fact, they were willing to commit felonies to stop me from doing it. I installed cameras the next morning, barbed wire, reinforced locks, called my buddy Tony at the EPA again, who casually mentioned that tampering with federally engineered flood infrastructure could result in a 25-year prison sentence. I emailed that to the city council, with pictures, just in case they got any more bright ideas. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was shifting. Maggie's grip was loosening, fast. Half a dozen residents showed up at my gate with questions, real ones, about their home insurance, about why their basements were flooding, about what it meant that their dream homes sat on stolen ground and redirected water. I showed them everything. One of them, a software engineer named Matt, offered to build a website. We called it creektruth.com. Within 72 hours, it had drone footage, scanned documents, annotated zoning maps, and a time-stamped water flow log that showed exactly how much creek water had been diverted to feed those HOA fountains. Over 3 million gallons, free PR for their sustainable community, stolen from my land. The best part? We added a Know Your Rights section, Texas water law, Federal Clean Water Act clauses, even template letters for filing your own EPA complaint. Maggie called it propaganda. We called it justice, and deep down, she knew the dam wasn't just holding water anymore. It was holding evidence, and when the day came to release it, it would drown more than lawns. They say sunlight is the best disinfectant, and Maggie Thornwell was about to get sunburned. 2 days after we launched creektruth.com, it hit the local news cycle like a wrecking ball. Channel 5 ran a segment titled Flooded by Greed and used drone footage from our site without even asking. I didn't mind. The shots were gorgeous. You could see the full development from above, cul-de-sacs curling like tentacles over stolen pasture land, with the dam sitting upstream like a quiet, brooding judge. Maggie, of course, tried to spin it. She held another press conference, this time with a different strategy: play the victim harder. "We're being harassed," she told the cameras, her voice trembling like she'd just escaped a hostage situation. "This man is waging a cyber attack on our peaceful community." Peaceful? Lady, your people bulldozed my cattle pond and redirected a creek through federal jurisdiction. You started a war with a man who builds combat-ready infrastructure for fun. The real punch came the next morning when the Austin Herald ran a deep-dive investigative article. The Thornwell Web, HOA corruption, water theft, and a city council conflict of interest. It was a full exposé. They traced Maggie's history through 3 HOAs in 2 different counties, each one marked by mysterious zoning changes, eminent domain seizures, and families forced off their land. They pulled Rick Thornwell's voting record and found that 92% of his rezoning approvals benefited developments linked to his brother-in-law's contracting firm. Game over. The city launched an ethics inquiry that afternoon. Rick Thornwell went ghost. No press, no statements, just a black SUV peeling out of City Hall. Maggie, though? She doubled down. She filed a restraining order against me, claiming I was a danger to public safety. Her evidence? A photo of me inspecting the dam at 3 a.m. with a flashlight and notebook. Your Honor, I was logging flow rates, not planning a flood. He judge denied her request in 10 minutes. But here's where it got juicy. That same night, someone leaked internal HOA emails to our website's tip line. Real emails, with timestamps. Maggie and her board discussing how to handle the Morrison problem, how to delay EPA inspections, how to forge a temporary wetland survey. It was all there, signed, dated, and criminal. And just like that, this wasn't a neighborhood squabble anymore. This was a federal case. And the flood hadn't even started yet. They thought they'd broken me. But what they'd actually done was give me time. Because when the city paused all HOA development permits for investigation, construction stopped cold. And when construction stops, eyes wander. Bankers get nervous. Neighbors start asking questions, and that's when you strike. Not with fists, but with facts. The dam was full, 3.1 million gallons. Recent rain had topped it off like a champagne glass at a doomed wedding. I'd calculated the flow pressure down to the decimal. Hydraulic gates still functional. Emergency spillway tested. Drone mapped every inch of runoff zone. 5 of their homes were built directly in the historical flood channel, without proper clearance, without FEMA compliance, without so much as a sandbag. And I wasn't even planning a full release. Just a partial reversion. A correction, if you will. Restore Willow Creek to its rightful path, per the 1978 Federal Watershed Agreement. Completely legal, completely traceable, and completely devastating to anyone who bet their $1 million mortgage on a lie. Still, I knew I had to play it smart. So I looped in Amanda Cross, the environmental lawyer. She reviewed every document, every permit, every water flow model. Her exact words, "You do this right, Jake, and you don't just win, you make case law." So we built a timeline. EPA filed suit against the HOA for Clean Water Act violations. City opened a fraud investigation into Rick Thornwell's zoning practices. FEMA was notified about non-compliant construction in a known floodplain. And the local news? They were now camped out near my gate, waiting for the next move. Maggie tried one last Hail Mary. A private mediator came to my door with a check for $750,000 and a gag order the size of a phone book. I didn't even open the envelope. Just handed him a copy of the Army Corps diagram labeled Emergency Spillway Operation Protocol, 1978. The look on his face, priceless. You see, this wasn't about money anymore. This was about principle. This was about legacy, about pops, about every family who got pushed off their land by developers playing Monopoly with people's memories. And most of all, it was about flow. Because when water remembers where it came from, it doesn't ask permission to go back. It was a Sunday morning. Quiet. Heavy clouds hung low, thick with humidity and judgment. I woke before dawn, boots on gravel before the sun even blinked. My dog, Rufus, watched me from the porch like he knew something was about to change. He wasn't wrong. I walked to the dam with calm hands and a storm heart. Every gauge had been checked, every camera live, every document filed and time-stamped. Amanda Cross stood by with a cup of coffee and a copy of the Clean Water Act. EPA observers tuned in via live stream. CreekTruth.com had 87,000 live viewers, a digital army holding its breath. And then, I turned the key. The gate groaned, metal on metal, tired but loyal after 45 years of silence. Water surged like a memory unburied. Not fast, not chaotic, controlled, engineered, intentional. It snaked down the old spillway path, kissing the roots of willows long since starved, then carving through the luxury turf grass of homes that shouldn't have existed. Within an hour, Willow Creek was flowing in its original bed. Within 2, it reached the edge of the HOA's new decorative creek, the one they'd built with stolen water and 0 permits. And then, homes flooded. Not destroyed, not wrecked, but wet enough. Basements soaked, sod ruined. Decorative bridges washed out. Concrete patios cracked under the pressure of redirected nature. And in the center of it all, Maggie Thornwell. Standing in her Lululemon tennis skirt, screaming into her phone, pointing at the sky like it had betrayed her. Neighbors emerged from their oversized garages, phones in hand, filming her meltdown in real time. Channel 5 cut in live. No script, no PR spin. Just Maggie, knee-deep in karma water, trying to scream over the sound of a creek reclaiming its home. But this wasn't vandalism. It was reversion, legally executed, federally protected. Amanda walked up beside me and whispered, "You just taught an entire country what happens when you don't respect water law." I didn't answer. Just stood there, the same way Pops used to. Back straight, eyes steady, watching something bigger than myself move with purpose. Want to be part of this movement? Then type "No King in the Cul-de-sac." Again, twice, right now. It's not just a comment, it's a warning. Because the next HOA that tries this, better check the water rights first. Monday morning. The HOA boardroom looked like a crime scene. Maggie didn't show up. Rumor had it she fled to her sister's condo in Houston. Rick Thornwell? Suspended from the city council pending ethics review. And the HOA lawyer? He looked like he aged a decade overnight. Word travels fast when floodwater rewrites a zip code. The EPA filed formal charges that afternoon: Clean Water Act violations, unauthorized alteration of a federally protected waterway, failure to obtain wetlands permits. Each count carried a $50,000 per day fine. And the kicker? The clock started 3 years ago, when they first touched Willow Creek. That's $54 million, give or take a few soggy hedge funds. Meanwhile, FEMA canceled insurance policy tied to the floodplain properties. Homeowners woke up to find their mortgages in default. Banks froze HOA accounts. And CreekTruth.com now had over 300,000 visitors and counting. I was contacted by 3 major environmental law firms. One offered a book deal. Another offered to represent me for free, just for the chance to take the case national. But the real moment? The town council. They held a public hearing to address recent neighborhood safety concerns. The room was packed. Reporters, farmers, veterans, retirees, even a few shaken Willowbrook residents who realized Maggie had sold them a utopia built on fraud and runoff. I stood at that mic again, held up a single water-stained photo, me and Pops standing by the dam when I was 10, holding catfish we'd caught in the creek. I didn't yell, I didn't gloat. I just said this: my grandfather built that dam to help the people downstream. You turned it into a moat for McMansions. I didn't flood your homes. You built them where floods belong. Silence, then applause. Slow at first, then rising like the creek itself. The town council voted 6-1 to strip Willowbrook Estates HOA of all zoning authority pending investigation. That's when I saw it. The final crack in the crown. This wasn't just a personal win. This was a message. To every overreaching HOA, every power-drunk board member, every bureaucrat who thought a title deed could beat blood, dirt, and legacy. The land remembers. The water remembers. And now, so does everybody else. 3 months later, the air smells different. Cooler, cleaner, like something sacred has returned. Willow Creek flows freely now, winding like a silver thread through restored meadows. Birds have come back, the kind Pops used to whistle to while fixing fence posts. I even saw a heron last week, gliding over the water like it owned the place. And maybe it does. Maybe it always did. The HOA, dissolved. Maggie, facing federal charges, water theft, environmental fraud, mail fraud, and obstruction. Her mugshots in the paper next to Rick's, the he. Adeline? From queen of the cul-de-sac to federal indictment, the fall of Willowbrook's power couple. Their development, declared uninsurable. Buyers backed out, properties abandoned mid-construction. One of the mansions now sits half-finished, rebar sticking out like broken bones. Locals call it Maggie's Folly. And the dam? Still holding strong, still watching, still remembering. I fixed up the old farmhouse, repainted the porch, rebuilt Pop's workbench, and every morning I walked down to the water, boots wet with dew, heart full of something I thought I'd lost: peace. It wasn't just about land. It was never just about land. It was about belonging, about fighting for something sacred in a world where everything feels bought, sold, and paved over. It was about standing firm when the bulldozers come, not with rage, but with facts, with laws, with legacy. One evening, a young couple drove up the gravel road in an old Ford, said they were thinking of buying land nearby, said they'd heard about the creek, the story, the fight. I offered them iced tea and told them what Pops once told me. You don't inherit land, you borrow it from your grandchildren, and if you're lucky, you leave it better than you found it. That's what this was, not revenge, not war. Restoration. If you've ever been steamrolled by power, silenced by bureaucracy, or bullied by people with clipboards and petty rules, remember this: you're not alone. There are more of us than there are of them. And when we stand together, farmers, neighbors, veterans, truth seekers, there are no kings in the cul-de-sac. Write it below, once for solidarity, twice for revolution. No kings in the cul-de-sac, No kings in the cul-de-sac, because history doesn't belong to the powerful. It belongs to the ones who remember. And now, so do you.